so amazing. 25 years and 3 months ago, I was walking exactly this path after just having had Puja Swamiji's darshan for the first time, right inside here in this room. I had his darshan, I met him for the first time, and I knew, I am meant to stay here. But at that time I still thought, well, we'll first go up to the mountains, we'll enjoy, we'll go for the adventure, then let's see what happens after that. And I walked out of that darshan, coming right here to this central pathway of Parmarth Niketan. And I was just about to turn here to head back to the hotel when my feet got stuck to the ground, literally right here to the ground, and I couldn't move. So standing here in that exact spot where I was 25 years and a few months ago, I thought, let me share with you that chapter from Hollywood to the Himalayas, because now you will be able to actually see the place where I was, what it looked like, what happened to me. So I'll begin from after having had Puja Swamiji's darshan the first time, after having met him, and I was walking out. I turned and walked toward the iron water pump in the center of the ashram complex, midpoint between the small road in front alongside the Ganga River and the small road in back that connects the back gates of all the ashrams lining this stretch of Swarg Ashram village. I turned right at the water pump to head back to our hotel, where I would tell Jim the great news of what happened. We could stay here after our trip to Badrinath. Jim was looking for a guru, and fortuitously, I had found one for both of us. But the moment my body turned right, I couldn't take another step. My feet were stuck to the ground. I looked down. Had I stepped in something? Indian chewing gum that had welded my bare feet to the concrete pathway? That time, of course, was early September. It was hot, so I didn't have socks on. There didn't appear to be something on the ground. Invisible crazy glue, then? What was it? Something was holding my feet to the ground. They wouldn't come up, no matter how hard I contracted my leg muscles to raise them. I scrunched my toes to see if I could feel something on the ground, but it felt just the way the concrete always does. Warm and smooth, not like chewing gum or crazy glue. Oh my God, I realized, I've contracted some horrible disease. One of my vaccinations didn't work, and I've lost the use of my legs. I must have polio, or tetanus, or Ebola, or some other disorder that is slowly eating away my muscles or my nerves. God, please help me. As I flailed my arms, trying unsuccessfully to extricate my feet from the ground, a wave of calmness suddenly washed over me. And as the wave descended, it drew the energy from my eyes, which had widened in fear, and down into my abdomen. After a few breaths, I calmly realized that fatal illnesses probably don't come on like this, suddenly, with no pain, no other symptoms, no warning, no infection or fever. Still not convinced, but at least calmer, I tried to think of other explanations. Maybe my legs had gone to sleep. We had been sitting on the floor in Puja Swamiji's room for a while, and I wasn't used to sitting on the ground. Maybe it was a delayed reaction, and my legs had fallen asleep. I put a hand on each calf, but they weren't numb or tingly, no pins or needles. They were not asleep. I closed my eyes. This was ridiculous. Normal, educated, scientific, healthy American students do not get themselves stuck to the pavement in an Indian ashram. There must be some simple explanation, an obvious solution. I visualized the motor cortex in my brain, right for my left leg, left for my right leg, communicating with my cerebellum as acetylcholine was secreted into my synapses. The motor neurons sent the signal down their axons into my spinal cord and ultimately into the muscles of my legs. Contract, contract, contract. Nothing. A small crowd was gathering around me. Being white was unusual, and I had found myself being stared at frequently during our days in Delhi. Now, however, I was not only white, but I was flailing my arms in the middle of the courtyard like an airplane trying to take off. At that moment, a group of children came racing down the central ashram pathway. Many of the ashram workers live in rooms around a courtyard in the back gardens. And most have children who, of course, run and play. They were playing an Indian version of tag and raced after each other at high speed. Instinctively, I stepped back to keep from being knocked over. The kids came just from down this pathway right here, running and playing. Instinctively, I moved back. The children passed, and I realized, I'm free. I just moved backwards. My feet aren't glued to the ground anymore. Immensely appreciative of the ability to lift one foot after the other off the ground, I turned again toward the back gate to make my way out of the ashram. And again, my feet were stuck. Now, in a slightly different place, a few inches behind where they had been glued before. But the feeling was identical. I could not contract a single muscle. No instruction from my brain, no amount of forcing or coaxing could get my feet to move. I just moved backward, I thought. I definitely did. For some inexplicable reason. Maybe I could walk backwards only. If someone had told me that I would contract an illness whereby I was restricted to backward motion, I would have laughed at the sheer idiocy of it. Your muscles work, or they don't. Your brain works, or it doesn't. You might develop a proprioception issue whereby you can't properly navigate your surroundings. But to be able to walk backward but not forward is absurd, unheard of, and utterly impossible. But it was true. I decided I had such a disease. Okay. With my feet still seemingly glued to the floor, as I had no other option, I swung around and shifted my weight. Actually, I think my feet were more like this. I shifted my weight, so I now faced back to Puja Swamiji's area, with my feet to the ashram's back gate and the hotel just past it. I will just walk out of this ashram backwards, I thought. Not at all distressed by the idea, and actually feeling proud at having successfully diagnosed my weird Indian ailment. But no, as I leaned back and tried to pick up my feet to follow the rest of my body, they wouldn't come, neither of them. They wouldn't budge. The crowd around me was growing, and I tried to ignore them. I had to figure this out. I tried, first facing forward, then facing backward, to walk out the ashram gates, and my legs wouldn't move. I could not walk out of the ashram. However, I had been able to walk backward when the children raced by. There was only one possible explanation. It was not the direction of my body that mattered. It was the direction I tried to move. I could move toward Swamiji's room, but I couldn't walk out of the ashram. As my eyes filled with tears, I tested my new hypothesis. I was already facing Puja Swamiji's room, for I had swung around while trying to walk backward out of the ashram. Could I walk forward then, toward his room? I lifted my right leg easily, and the left just as easily. As though walking on the beach in footsteps already imprinted in the sand, I walked back toward his meeting room. I entered the room and realized that only a few moments, perhaps 5 or 7 minutes, had passed since I left it the first time. Suddenly, gently, he lifted his gaze from the family he was sitting with to me, standing by the door. Yes, he said with a smile that did not have even a trace of surprise. I think, I began slowly, still undecided about my next move. I think I am supposed to stay now. Swamiji continued to smile gently, nodded his head, and said, "Welcome." He then turned his gaze back to the family at hand. So that's the story of how my feet got glued right here in this central spot of this beautiful ashram. And although I was trying to walk out, the divine flow of the universe knew I needed to stay. And if the ground needed to reach up and grab my legs, so be it. So happy to share this story with you. And we'll be doing more of the readings here around the ashram in the different places where all of the different events of Hollywood to the Himalayas actually took place. Have a beautiful, beautiful holiday season.